Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. This is episode number 300 of the show. My wife doing jazz hands.
It's sign language for clapping.
Oh, okay. Glitter guy. We've been watching Only Murders in the Building, and so I got the glitter motion down. But for all of you listening, welcome to the show today. This is a special milestone. We're recording our 300th episode.
Good job, babe.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And my beautiful wife, in case you're wondering who the voice is, this is my beautiful wife, Joy, who has been on the show several times. And in fact, you had a solo episode or an interview episode that was one of the most downloaded episodes.
Oh, I was like, I did a solo. Did I do that in my sleep?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
But one of the most downloaded episodes on the podcast, which is really fun. Yeah. Apparently people prefer you to me.
I don't know about that.
I can't blame them, though. You're much prettier than me. Oh, so.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, we're celebrating 300 episodes. I thought what we do, I feel like I have to bring you on anytime there's like a special milestone.
That's not me being like, when am I coming?
Yeah, no. It's definitely me being like, oh yeah, you got to join me on the show. This is a very special time though, because both of our kids are asleep.
Yeah, it's rare. So we're counting down until we hear the cries again.
And I guess you can stay as long as you want to stay, because I know you said you had some things you wanted to do.
Yeah.
I kind of actually asked, I was like, please sit down with me to do this. Because I know you getting some respite. It's nice when both kids are asleep and you can actually breathe.
It's okay. I like being in here with you.
Well, thank you for that. But yeah, so I thought what we'd do is we'd kind of update on the business, update on the podcast. Not much else to say other than just maybe kind of talk a little bit about our journeys. So you have a business. Culture Connection.
Yes.
And we've talked a little bit about business ownership. Maybe like a good place to start would be like for the listeners. So we're coming up on 5 years of the podcast. We'll have like a special, like maybe 5 years episode soon. But with the 300th episode, I guess what's changed in the last 5 years is we've had 2 kids.
Yeah.
There's been a massive pandemic.
We've moved.
Yeah. We sold our house, right? Yeah. But definitely, I feel like the kids one is like the biggest.
For sure.
Out of all of those.
I mean, pandemic's a big deal, but having 2 kids and not having kids is also a big deal.
Yeah, life is definitely very different. We had some friends who visited and they had I think they have 4 kids, the Blackfords.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That was before we had kids.
Before we had kids, yeah. They visited, they were staying here. And they have 4 kids and the kids said maybe they were winding down and one of our friends looked at us and they were like, kind of like looking at how we don't have any kids. And they were like, so what do y'all do?
What do y'all do?
We were like, what are you talking about? What do we do? We I don't know, get coffee and hang out and it's great. And now that we have kids, we like totally understand that line of thinking of, yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So.
And your business is still going. So
still
congrats.
in business. Yeah. Still
Says
in business.
A lot.
Yeah, I don't know if it says a lot in the sense of like it's this amazing business. Maybe I'm too stubborn to, I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of people do this. When negative things happen versus positive things, you replay the negative. I think we've even talked about this before.
Probably.
But whenever good things happen, like you get a good sale or like you get a lot of encouragement or whatever, you tend to not celebrate yourself as much as when something is not happening the way you want. You tend to replay that over again. So you should be proud of yourself.
Are you saying a general you, like we as people, or me specifically?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
That's where I was,
but also
originally starting, but I was rounding it back to like you also are falling into that, unfortunately. I mean, but I'm saying you're not like bad because like everyone does.
As a single tier.
All that to say is, for having started your business right before we had a kid, right before the pandemic, I'm saying I think we should be proud of it, even though it's not like as you maybe envisioned it would be this far down the road.
Right.
I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because I think how we envision our business being, it's like, I think social media doesn't really help with that because everyone's communicating a story of it happening faster than it does. Like a friend of mine, Kristen Sherry, who's been on the podcast a few times, she's an international best-selling author. She's amazing. Well, she just published a new book, and she's published several books.
Congrats.
Well, she just shared a snip of an ad she saw that was marketed to book owners, like a social media post that said, basically read how I wrote and published my book in 30 days and made $15K on it and have gotten all these sales from it. And so Kristen basically grabbed a picture of that and posted it and was like, this is total BS. Like you will not. And here's the deal. Here's what kind of drives me crazy is like the people who are like, I call it toxic positivity. It's like, well, you're saying it can't happen. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's like that movie, the whole, like, it's the exception, not the rule. What's that chick flick?
I'm not sure.
Well, it's the one where,
Sorry.
oh my gosh, we have to watch this, by the way.
But
I feel like we've seen this. Well, it's the one where like the girl goes on a date and he doesn't call her. And then the friends are like, well, maybe he's like stuck in a phone booth, or that doesn't make sense. Maybe he's stuck like in an elevator, or maybe instead of like going to the simplest answer. And so the way the plot develops is like, no.
Is it he's just not that into you or something like that?
Maybe it could be.
Yes. Yeah.
But the point being is like, do these things ever happen? Sometimes. Like a friend of mine started a new business and signed Switchfoot, the band, like within like a week, and was like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I was like, is it kind of, it's kind of like, are you kidding me? But that's the exception. It's not the rule. And the point that I'm getting at is like running a business. We often think it's supposed to happen faster than it's really
and
going
it's good to be optimistic and positive, but having that dose of realism can help encourage others who might be going through the same thing.
Right.
A waiting game. And
right. And it's interesting, the people who've come on the podcast, I've had so many like $1 million business owners who literally all have the same story, which is for years I worked on my business and then eventually built up enough momentum that it became what it is. I don't think I've had one person on the show, which again, like the toxic positivity people would be like, well, you're not having the right people on. I don't think I've had one person on the show who's been that one hit wonder who's like, yeah, I started my business and 30 days later, it was a multi-million dollar.
And hearing that, it's not bad to hear those stories, but because it can inspire people and it can give you a rush of like, oh my goodness, the possibilities. But I think majority, you hear that, and instead of being like, I can be like that, you're like, oh, I'm not that.
Yes. I think social media definitely gives more way to like negative comparison than like taking inspiration. Like I feel like or maybe I'm just speaking for myself, I feel like my tendency is, whenever I read a story like that, I have to fight the temptation to be like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Why haven't I done that? Rather than like, it's possible I can do it, which I'm sure some people, they do walk away with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess that does it.
I saw someone pull up in our front yard and I was like, I hope the dog doesn't start barking, waking up children.
Again, kids sleeping. So, but I don't know. I guess where do we take this conversation on our 300th episode? We've already started rolling out advertising for the podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which is really exciting.
I could ask you some questions.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay. What has been one of your favorite guests on the show? Or maybe you don't have to like do that to make other people feel bad, but like what type of conversation do you leave feeling like, oh, that was really great?
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of conversation I just mentioned of people who come on the show and they have just like a very realistic story of like the struggle and challenges that they faced, like that's very encouraging. The other thing that I think has been really sweet about the podcast and the way I've done like guest interviews is like more often than not, I ask someone like, hey, do you want to come on the show and talk about your business? And 99% of the time, people will say, yeah, of course, I'd love to do that. I think one of the sweetest things about the podcast has been having people on who I have no business talking to, but who came on and not only gave like great advice, but the integrity of who they are and who they present themselves as, like that integrity is there. Like think about like the kind of the cliche of like the person you you see like the celebrity person who you meet like in the movies, they meet them in person. They're like a total, jerk. I think what's been really great is the people who present themselves in a way on social media, and then you meet them and talk to them off camera, and you're like, oh my gosh, this person's really cool.
Yeah.
Like I think about Jackie Hermes, David Breyer, Damon Burton, Zach Messler. I mean, all these people who are incredible business owners. They have an amazing presence on social media. Jackie is posting entrepreneurship advice every day. David's posting branding advice every day. And being able to sit down with those people and have a conversation with them. I mean, David gave me his phone number to call him to get advice and never asked like for anything from it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I just think about these people who are who they present themselves as. And so I think that's been, we talk about like cynicism in the world and, all the things you can get negative about. That's been a really cool like stroke of positivity with the podcast is like, hey, there are people out there who are successful and aren't awful people, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, just are real.
Yeah.
Are real. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So,
okay. Also, I'm curious. I feel bad. I admit I have not listened to all of Blake's podcasts. I know I should be your number one fan.
No. Well, you were. I mean, I remember like early on, like there were like 3 downloads on like an episode, like in the first days. And I think you were 1 and I was probably 2 on like 2 other devices. So you tracked with it for a while.
I did. And I still have, yeah. So I want to say a question, but you might have answered it and your listeners are like, oh, we hear this all the time. So just let me know. But have you ever like told the story of like career wise and education wise, like where you started and kind of how you ended up here? Probably a little thread throughout all of your podcasts.
I mean, I don't know how interesting, I don't know how much people care.
Sure.
Like, what's your life career story?
Not like your story. I guess, I don't know. For me, it's fascinating because I like you.
I think that the thing where I've brought it up before is how sometimes like changing career paths isn't as clunky as it may seem. Like when you think about it on paper, I went from a biology major to being a school teacher to being like a leadership coach to now running this business, Good Advice, and a podcaster. There's a couple of somewhat easy to see links, like leadership coaching and then running the business, Good Advice. But like teaching to leadership coaching is a very weird jump. And before all of that, camp counselor, kids counselor
right,
at a
where
kids
we
camp.
met.
Yeah. Scandalous. It's not. I don't know why I made it seem like it was.
We were camp counselors together. He always tells people when they ask how we met and we worked at a summer camp, he's like, I was her counselor, which does seem weird.
I think it's a fun joke, but she never really. And honestly, people don't really seem to like it either when I tell it. So
they're like, oh. Yeah.
So Joy pretty quickly is like, no, we didn't. Stop saying that. But no, I think about like, I think the point of the meaningfulness behind the story is like, sometimes you pick up skill sets that aren't necessarily related to the job you're doing, but are valuable outside of the job. So like being a kids counselor, I learned to find comfort in speaking in front of people because at certain points you're standing up in front of 300 kids and you're on something. Yeah, you're on stage, so to speak. And kids will tell you how it is. It can be kind of intimidating. And so I learned at a young age to be comfortable with that. And long story short, that helped me in teaching, helped me with coaching.
Reading a room, like knowing, facilitating.
That was probably really gross because I saw your hair move when I coughed. And so.
I mean, yeah.
We're just in the thick of it.
Nothing faces me like that anymore.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's been it's kind of interesting. And I think it's valuable like in the world of entrepreneurship because sometimes we're like, oh, what would I even do as an entrepreneur? And maybe it's less about like checking a box in terms of like which job would I do and more about like typically when someone asks like what business should I start, I typically say what is a problem you genuinely feel like you could solve and what are you uniquely gifted or passionate about. Because if you are really great at web design and you want to start like a web design business but you hate being in front of a computer, it's not really going to make much sense. Or if you have a gifting of landscaping, you can look at a front yard and just see the things that should be changed, but you hate being outside.
I wish, well, not the second thing, but I wish I had an eye for that.
Well, and not that you can't learn, but
Right.
like you probably aren't going to go start a business doing that. Just
nope.
like I wouldn't, because I was talking to a guy today about,
I'd make a lot of people mad.
I was talking to a guy who I was telling him that he at some point wants to update like his branding, like his logo, his brand colors. And then I very quickly followed it up with, and I don't do that, by the way, just because I know that I don't have that skill set.
Right.
But point being, when those two things mesh together really well, you're gifted and you are aware of a problem you can solve. I think that is a really great potential business idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kind of on that note, but kind of not. Like a skill set you have is you are certified in, am I saying this right?
Berkman?
Yes.
Yeah.
I always say a different acronym and it's embarrassing. But Berkman.
And Berkman's not the acronym. It's the name of the person who created it, Dr. Berkman.
Okay. So MBTI is an acronym of another thing that you used to be able to do.
Yeah. I still can do it. I just don't typically do it.
I think as a listener, people listening, maybe there's a small few that like could care less about this type of stuff, but I think most people find these types of things fascinating. Like, because it's fun to learn about oneself and how you relate with other people. What is something with Berkman that, as someone who could literally sit down with someone after having taken the test, that would be like just kind of a fun thing to know? Like, I don't know.
I'm doing a Berkman. I'm doing like a Berkman with a customer next month.
Well, also, what is Berkman?
Yeah, so Berkman is if you've ever like taken like a personality test at work, it's kind of like that, but it's like an actually like scientifically validated. It's not like astrology. Like you're the earth element. And
this is your birthday, therefore you're this.
Yeah, this is your birthday.
We don't dog on that. I know some people who are really passionate, and I don't want to offend them.
I dog on it a little bit. Maybe Joyce says that as the peacemaker, but I don't know. I
sure.
Whatever you want to call it. This is actually like scientifically validated. Like it's basically the way it's determined is you answer a ton of questions about like how you see the world, how you see your coworkers, how you see certain professions, and then they develop like a profile about your interest and passion in the workplace. But it's nothing beyond that in the sense of like, I can't even think of an example, but
isn't there also things like when you feel stressed? Your tendencies, what you need when you aren't stressed.
Yeah, because you are answering questions about how you respond to things, and so it basically spits it back out to you in a language that you can communicate with.
Right.
But point being, this is. I wish this was sponsored by Berkman, but it's not.
It feels like I planned this. I did not.
No. I was just going to say the cool thing about Berkman, though, which is just it's for people who like manage people or have teams, is like I just said, it gives you the language of how to communicate. So like one of the interesting insights is like I remember I was doing this with the team, and there are just different personalities in the workplace. And what we typically do is we assign like an emotional value to the people we mesh really well with and the people we don't mesh with. In worst case scenario, a boss who doesn't mesh with an employee might subconsciously think that person is less qualified.
Oh, I see.
When they aren't, they just have very different personalities. It's like, let's say you're a happy-go-lucky, chatty boss. You come in, you go to everyone's desk. Hey, how are you? What'd you do this weekend? Your first hour, which by the way, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, you're building culture. It's fine. But you spend the first hour going around and talking to people.
A green person would be like, this is the best boss ever.
So you might have you might have an employee who really gels with you and you're like, oh, I love that person. They're a great team member. And then you might have someone who is
very task oriented.
Yeah. And not rude, but like aloof. Like one word, oh yeah, it was good. And like no elaboration. Like, how was your weekend? Good. And they don't ask it back, and so like you feel like maybe you're kind of like drowning in this conversation. And the worst thing that could happen would be for that boss to walk away and be like, you know what, that employee just really isn't, they're just not a good fit here. When maybe, while everyone's gathering around to chat about their weekend, that's the only employee who's actually getting any work done.
So you need a good variety of personalities.
Well, and the important thing about Berkman is it helps you understand those differences so that you realize the power of personality and the okayness with differences in personalities rather than like falling into the trap of I need to surround myself with people who are just like me.
Yeah.
which is very tempting in today's culture is, let me find people who agree with me, think the same way as me,
Right.
See everything the way I do it. But,
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's fun to take it and compare it with your spouse too, because you can. Or the thing that tracks how much you like with different interests, things like numbers or social, what am I trying to say?
Social service, yeah.
Social
yeah, so it'll give you, it'll give you the areas that you're most interested in,
And
things you like doing.
My
really.
numbers score was 1, right?
Yes.
Or like 0.
Yeah, it's on a scale from 1 to 100, and Joy's numbers score was a 0 or a 1.
So if you're like me and you run a business and your score for numbers is very low, you need help in the area of,
it is
logging your
it is
finances.
something I just thought of is when I work with business owners, I don't do Berkman with them, but I wonder if I should implement that, because it would
Even
be
if it's
interesting.
not Berkman, but something that would help
Yeah.
hey, do you get stressed out at the thought of daily logging in your hours or logging in your invoices? To me, that's fall asleep now, shut my laptop, do that tomorrow, do it tomorrow, and then it never happens.
Right.
That's why he helps me.
Well, and it's a great piece of advice, Joy, because ultimately, I was talking to someone the other day who was like, well, why would I pay someone to do something that I can just do myself? Well, there are just things in your business that you're going to do really well and really quickly. And there's gonna be other things that you don't do well and you don't do quickly. And so that's the magic of why you outsource certain things, is because you're trying to maximize the time you're spending on things you do really well.
What did you just recently add to your...
We hired someone for social media. And so we have someone, Brianna, who is cutting a bunch of video content for us, putting it together. And that was a large investment. It will be a large investment year to year.
And that's because you weren't waking up every day passionate about how am I going to look at this content that I have and post it now. You're able to...
I'm passionate about the content, but I'm not passionate about let me open the video editor. And then I found myself spending, because I'm not fast at it, I'm spending all this time cutting content instead of actually growing the business. That is why I hired someone for it.
And maybe if I was doing more full time with Culture Connection, and I had the funds, I'd probably be that's somewhere to look at. If I were to hire somebody, it'd probably be in the realm of that type of administration of some sort of bookkeeping or something.
Yeah.
You never know where my questions will lead.
Yeah. Well, great insights. And Berkman, if you're listening, you can pay us for giving you a shout out.
I'll be a representative.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll ask you a question. What is life like with 2 kiddos?
Constant. It's a joy. It's rewarding and exhausting. It definitely gives me a respect for mothers and fathers. Anybody who spends a lot of time at home with children, you always hear they worked, the mom, maybe you don't always hear this. I'm trying to say is even though maybe my work as a language instructor has decreased, I'm still working.
Right.
So there's still that physical expend
you're not sitting around while the kids just do whatever. You're working all day too.
So it's working hasn't stopped in that sense of it. So there's just a lot, but it's also really sweet to just see 2 little humans that have come from you and me, and just be wow, they're going to be a part of my life forever.
Right. For better or worse.
God willing. And so,
It's really dark all of a sudden.
but it's hard to navigate working and being a mom.
Right.
That is difficult.
Where do you get I know you do a mom's day on Wednesdays. Is community the answer for navigating that challenge, or how do you naviate?
I mean, navigating my work. If I want to navigating my work with being a mom. So like, you know, like having the time of day or the mental energy to like put for like, and having the right time with my kids' nap schedules, you know, or with your schedule, like it working to where I can pick up a student. That's what I mean as far as that's concerned. But what are you asking?
Oh no, I was just kind of riffing off of what you were saying of like, you know, the whole thing's very challenging. Like, I guess do you learn on the job, or like how do you how do you learn to do all this stuff? You know, I mean,
yeah, a mixture of learning in the moment of being a mom, learning in the moment, reading. I liked reading beforehand different things depending on what the topic was, and as far as parenting or motherhood, gaining wisdom from mothers, you know, like your own parents, aunts, sisters, family members, friends. Yeah. So community, and also just having an outlet of other moms who you can just like feel comfortable with and be like, we're all in this together, you know, and asking questions to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think kids are good teachers too. Books are good teachers, and people are good teachers. And a lot of prayer. Yeah. Yep.
It's definitely not easy, and it kind of makes me think of like the people who have asked, like, "Do you have any advice?" And they're like, "No."
Oh, when the other people say that?
Yeah. They're like, "No, I don't have any advice."
One time we were at this little like 4th of July parade, and we were like strolling our daughter, and I was holding our baby to like get to where we were going. And we had to pass by the parking lot of an assisted living facility.
Right. Yeah.
So there was a lot of elderly people in their little like lawn chairs. Also, I think I hear our baby crying.
I think I do too.
But anyway, our daughter at one point, we had to like tell her, hey, we're going to get you out of the stroller because we're going to cross the street and it's going to take a while, blah, blah, blah. We're going to, there was the end of the sidewalk was happening.
Right.
And so we're like, we can't be in the stroller right now. And she was kind of like going to have a meltdown.
Right.
And so we both looked at each other. She started to have a meltdown. Yeah. We looked at each other, and then Blake like looked at this woman who was sitting there just like watching, just watching us. And he goes, do you have any advice? And she goes, honey, that was a long time ago. And we just both laughed.
And then really I picked up my crying daughter and walked.
Yeah, that was really cute. Honey, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yeah, you like to ask people that. Do you have any good advice? And I was like, that's funny because that's your business name.
Well, how about that? Mm-hmm. So anyway, well, since our kid is probably awake and screaming, thank you for taking your break to join me on the show.
Of course.
I really appreciate it. I know these are sacred times. So thank you for that, honey.
I don't know. I hope being here was meaningful to someone.
It's always great having you back having you back. You're in the same house as me, like, you know. Yeah. But no, I mean 300 episodes. I think the reason I keep having you on is that it's special to me, because you know, you think about people they tell stories of entrepreneurship of like their spouse being like, when are you gonna get a real job? And you've just always been like since day one, like, yeah, great, like thick and thin, always so supportive, even when I was in multiple times very low moments.
Yeah.
And so it's important to me to have you on the show just because you're my other half with what we're doing. So
we've seen the good and the bad and the ugly. Yeah. I think there needs to be 4 words, like good, bad, ugly. There needs to be like, and beautiful.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say like, and horrible.
No, like
good,
beautiful, good, bad, ugly.
Yeah. Bad, ugly, better, and best.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. If you listen to it long term, thanks for your support. 300 episodes and hopefully many more to come. Mm-hmm. So all that to say,
support the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. You support the podcast. We got advertising on the podcast. You can also check our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. And yeah, anyway, thank you guys for listening. That's today's good advice. We'll catch you later.